All right, to discuss this further, I'm now being joined by Dr. Kadira Pithiagora, who's joining me from London. He's a geopolitics expert and Australian diplomat, and there you are. Dr. Kadira, thank you so much for joining me here on the broadcast. Now, let me just start off with the desalination plant and the attacks that we saw. We discussed this briefly yesterday as well. The attack which initially started on the Keshem Islands, and after the desalination plant was targeted there, Iran blamed the US. Bahrain said that the drone attack damaged their water desalination plant, and I think it had been made clear by the foreign minister, as I had just quoted him, that the precedent was set by the US, not by Iran. How dangerous is the weaponization of water in a war being fought in a region like West Asia, which deeply depends on such plants?
Yes, so it is, sorry, I'll just say formative for that. Yeah, the retaliation that Iran undertook, I guess they would say, was in response to a US escalation. And it is a major escalation because before that, neither side had struck critical civilian infrastructure. And the US striking Iran may have signaled potential desperation from the US. But I think one of the things we've seen in this war is that Trump may not actually be in complete control of where it's going. You know, we've got different forces within the US, the anti-war base in Trump's anti-war base wanting a quick resolution. You've got other groups wanting a longer war, including Israel. So it is a major escalation. It's something that we have seen before. In the past, we saw it in Iraq, where the United States really targeted state failure. And this may be part of the goal here as well, where they want to increase pressure on the Iranian government, increase the likelihood of an uprising. But then on the other hand, we've also seen that the US has all but abandoned the hopes of a quick regime change by a revolution. So there's a lot of confusion out there. It's a very dangerous precedent, particularly for the Gulf countries, because they need water, the desalination plants for their water, much more than Iran does. You know, some countries needing up to 90% of their water to be desalinated.
An attack on a desalination plant in Bahrain, within 24 hours of an attack of a desalination plant in Iran, you know, just the repercussions of it, because this is going to impact Bahraini nationals. It's going to impact civilians more or as much as anyone else. Iran has not uttered a word on it. Bahrain has already made it clear that it was Iran who carried out that drone strike. But what kind of direction is this giving to the war when civilians are now getting affected directly? And of course, civilians across Iran are already affected, but across West Asia now as well.
Yeah, I think it's a very sad precedent. I think Bahrain is really the weakest link in terms of the US strategic infrastructure and control within the Gulf, because Bahrain has a 70% Shiite population. It's ruled by a Sunni monarch, and there were rumors today that he'd left the country. There's high risks of an uprising, and one thing I've said from the start is that it's probably likely that Bahrain would see regime change before Iran. And so I think that as things go tit for tat, I think civilians will be drawn into this conflict, because we're seeing a real full-scale war here where you know, nothing is being left off the table.
Dr. Kadira, as you mentioned, the support in Bahrain for the monarch and the Shia population over there. Now, if I were to just expand that across West Asia, do you find more pockets in other countries which are perhaps also sympathetic towards the Iranian Shia population? And if that is so, the attacks that are being carried out from Iran towards other Gulf nations, does that draw a wedge between the Gulf nations and Iran, thereby bringing a direct impact on the Palestinian cause, which was essentially at the heart of it all?
Well, I think the other big country with a significant Shiite population is Saudi Arabia, which is the big, and so that's an extremely important strategic partner for the United States. So even though there may not be enough Shiites for regime change in Saudi Arabia, there is enough to cause some severe instability, particularly if the economy starts to crash. And then you've got, of course, Iraq, which is majority Shiite as well, which is not a Gulf state, but can have significant impacts throughout the region. And then you've got the Palestinians, and obviously, even though they're Sunni, a lot of them have a lot of sympathy for Iran. And then the other one is Lebanon, which is also majority Shiite. And then you've got Hezbollah already having entered the war. So I think the future of the Middle East region, the Levant and the Gulf, is extremely perilous. And I don't think we're going to see that economic stability that we saw in the 20th century really return to that area.
If I were to come back to the Palestinian Gaza, with Saudi Arabia and UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, when they are more on the side of similar attacks as Israel is facing, when they are facing a similar adversary now, in the sense that Iran has given that sense that we apologize, they are our brother nations, those attacks are still carrying out. That was just lip service at this point. But does that kind of bring these nations, Gulf nations, which have been very much in favor of a two-state solution, standing in the same side as Israel, and thereby compromising on the call for a Palestinian state? Do you see it heading in that direction?
I would see that call has already been compromised because we saw with the Abraham Accords a lot of the Gulf states, particularly the UAE, moving overtly towards supporting Israel. Before, everyone knew that they were all on Team USA, both Israel and the Gulf states, but they weren't overt about it. And what you saw with the Abraham Accords is these countries moving closer towards Israel, normalizing ties with Israel. Then you saw October 7 happen, and it became very difficult for these countries to normalize their ties with Israel. And so now, yes, you're seeing both Israel and the Gulf states being bombarded by Iran. But I think when you talk about the populations of the Middle East, I think they're quite aware that Iran is targeting the bases in the Gulf states because of the US presence. And it was always known that if the US was going to attack Iran, it would use those bases to attack Iran. So none of this is really surprising, I think, for the people there. And for the Palestinian cause, I think it's just really difficult to say it would really matter what the outcome of this war is, and the role of greater powers like China, Russia, and the US as well.
As far as the confusion that has been, whether you look at US when it comes to their objectives, there were a lot of questions. Why or what has caused these hostilities in the first place when negotiations were already on and heading in a decent direction. Also, coming in from the Iranian side, the leaders they've given mixed signals, apologizing and then carrying out strikes even on civilian infrastructure. They're saying we're only targeting US bases, but that's not it. There were no US bases in the desalination plant or in the Dubai airport or in Kuwait in the airports. I mean, also the refineries in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, ports in Dubai, in Bahrain. So clearly they're going after everything, but the statements suggest something different. Is there a break, when I talk about the Iranian side, is there a break or a gap between what the IRGC is carrying out and what the leadership is actually projecting?
I think there is some, there are some differences there, clearly in terms of how it's being interpreted by the region. But I think that I would also say there is some consistency there in terms of what the leader did say, what the president did say was that if these bases are used, then they will be attacked. And you mentioned, the oil refineries, the airports. I think the Iranian side would say, well, these are being used by US in terms of the CIA, and obviously the oil refineries are not part of that, but the hotels are. And then the oil refineries, I think it's what they said before this war would be, which would be the critical infrastructure of the oil-producing Gulf states would be impacted. But there is some interesting mirroring. You know, you see on the Iran side, there's hardliners, and then there's the president, and there's a difference there. And even on the US side, you see the anti-war MAGA base of Trump, and then you see these various interest groups that want a broader war.
Dr. Kadra, very quickly, I'll just try to get your response on one more question. The way the UK has gotten dragged into this entire conflict, and that statement from Trump, it was far more than a nudge. Saying that we don't need leaders to take part in a war that we've already won. Of course, a lot of bravado coming in from the US, but the fact that, now they're deciding to send out aircraft carriers after all this while, and then UK allowing their bases for the US to be used in defensive tactics. How do you find UK's involvement in this war going forward? Is this more under pressure now, just to keep the big man happy?
Yes, well, I think it's interesting because, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he's facing, historically low opinion ratings. And I think he's facing a lot of pressure from the left because you saw him take positions during the conflict in Gaza that were very unpopular. And the ruling Labour Party has just lost a by-election to the Greens from the left. So I think he may see this is maybe an opportunity to show that he's actually trying to stand up to the US. But then there's criticism that he's not doing that enough because he's allowing this to happen as well. But then on the other hand, there's criticism from people like Tony Blair on the right saying that he should get involved. So I think he's walking a very difficult tightrope as well.
Perhaps getting squished between internal politics and geopolitics. But of course, that's something internal to the UK at this point. The fight has expanded. Let's leave it there. Also the blast outside the US embassy in Oslo, Scandinavian nations also taking the brunt of what's happening in West Asia. We'll need to wait and watch how this one goes on because it is moving at a very fast pace with hostilities only increasing by the day. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Kadra joining me from London.
Thank you.